Well, hey, it's Wes, and whew, it has been a busy few weeks, because not only do we have the subject of this video, the new Viltrox 13.1.4, out of nowhere, probably much to Viltrox's surprise, we have the 15.1.4 from Sony, the 11.1.8 from Sony, the 10 to 20 f4 from Sony. The competition is steep, so let's dive right in and see how Viltrox does against this now suddenly really full field. Starting with, as always, the build quality. Build quality is very familiar. Let's bring out the 24.1.8 from Viltrox. Now this 24 is actually a full frame lens. Love this lens. Great for close-up vlogging, great autofocus. It's not perfect, but it's very good compact lens. So we have all metal design, very similar, well-dampened focus ring. We have the aperture. It is permanently declicked. There's a little click going into auto. No buttons or knobs going on here like some of the Sony ones, but it's all metal. We do not have an O-ring in the back, but it is dust sealed. They have some seals around it, and I really need to point out that this lens hood is largely made of metal. It has great positive contact when you put it on there. Some lens hoods, you snap them on and you gotta like fiddle around and stuff looking at you, Tamron. But this one, it goes on so easy, so smooth. Really nice lens hood. Good solid lens cap. On the back here, you'll also notice we have a USB-C port. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So overall, we're lacking full weather and moisture sealing, but very tough, rugged design. It's an 8.5 out of 10 for build quality. Next up is handling and usability. And here's where we get a bit of a knock, because this is a big lens. It's not a knocked lens, but it's also not teeny tiny little lens like all these new Sony lenses are. Look how much bigger it is than this 15.1.4. It is big and heavy for an APS-C lens. Like, look at it next to the camera here. However, it's got a great feel to the manual focus. You have an aperture ring, even though it's not clickable. You have a USB-C port on the back, so firmware updates, if you've never tried one on a Viltrox lens, are crazy easy. You download the file, plug the lens into the computer, drag and drop, it's done. None of this crazy faffing about like you do with a Sony lens with installer software and putting it on the camera and installing it through the camera. Just bing, boom, done. And on the sides here, as we mentioned, we don't have manual focus, autofocus buttons. We don't have a custom button. It would be nice to have a manual focus button. I really like having those on there. Overall, great lens for usability, just a little bit on the chunky side for APS-C. That's an 8.5 out of 10. Image quality. Some might say this is the most important thing. And we have some things that we need to compare this to pretty much directly. And I have to say, I was surprised. The last few Viltrox lenses I've tested wide open, they don't perform fantastically. This one's, it's okay wide open, but it's not great. Chromatic aberration is not terribly well controlled on this lens. Distortion, however, is well controlled on this lens, which is a surprise. Normally that's the first thing that people let go of with a smaller ultra-wide lens, and this one is pretty well corrected for distortion. Sharpness, as soon as you stop it down to like 1.8 to 2.8, it looks great for sharpness. Compared to the Sony lenses, throughout most of the field, except for wide open, it is as sharp or sharper than the 15G. I'm not entirely sure that I got a good copy of this 15G. I heard a lot of people saying great things about it. You'll have to stick around for my full review on that coming very soon. But except for wide open, it was outperformed by the Viltrox. And the 11.1.8, however, largely outperforms the Viltrox, except in terms of distortion. These Sony lenses, all three of these ultra-wide Sony lenses, the distortion is off the handle. And that's how they got these lenses to be so small. The distortion is wild on them, and they just assume you're going to apply correction, but it's not the best choice. It can reduce sharpness, it gets in the way when it comes to like doing video. You're going to be losing some of your frame because it's got to warp that frame in, so you're a certain wideness, but you're not going to be that wide. Whereas the Viltrox, you lose almost nothing to distortion. Color and contrast, not quite as good as the Sony's, nor is the flare resistance. However, if you want to get interesting photos, this does have some very nice quality of flares, and the sun stars are fantastic. I'm going to give that a 7 out of 10 for image quality. It gives and it takes. Image character. This one is a tricky one when it comes to ultra-wide lenses. Most ultra-wides, you can't really get a lot of bokeh on this. However, this is an equivalent of close to 20 millimeters at 2.1, an f2.1. So you can get bokeh if you get close, and this has a pretty close focusing distance. You can get to 0.73 feet or 0.22 meters. You can get right up there, you can get some bokeh going on, and so things do look pretty good. It gets pretty smooth. It can get a little bit nervous from time to time. Not all backgrounds will do this though. The bokeh itself does have some onion ringing and some spots and stuff, so it's not perfect. But overall, you get the sun stars, you get some nice smoothness going on in a lot of situations. I've got to give this an 8 out of 10 for image character. I love the look of this lens. I've really enjoyed using this. It's been great. I'm going to keep using this for sure. Autofocus. I was really surprised here because the last couple Viltrox lenses that I tried out really disappointed me. The 50 just did not hold up the way that it should have. The IIF and the advanced features, it just did not work as well as some other lenses. Some other lenses being the Viltrox 85, the Viltrox 24. I don't know what's going on with this 50mm lens. However, the 13 is fantastic. The focus is so fast. Now, these other Sony ultra-wides, their focus is also redonkulously fast. All 4 of these lenses are crazy fast for autofocus. This is easily the fastest autofocusing lens Viltrox has ever made. Most of them previous to this just had a little bit of lag to them, which honestly was fine because with their 85mm 1.8, even with that lag, it's still way faster than the Sony 85GM. I'm sure they're going to be updating that soon. Very impressed. The IIF still isn't quite as perceptive as on a native Sony lens, so that's the only knock that I have for this. So I've got to give this a 9 out of 10 for autofocus. I am shocked. Shooketh. I tried this on the ZV-E10 as well as the A7 IV. Value, and that's where we're gonna get something great out of Viltrox. That's what we expect. Do they deliver? This lens is currently on Indiegogo where it can be had for under 400 bucks. However, when it finally releases publicly, just in like a few days from now, it's gonna be $430. How does that compare? Let's have a look here. There is a Rokinon f2 autofocus, 12mm. At $400, costs a little less, but it's an f2. We got like a whole stop of difference between these two lenses. Then we also have all these Sony lenses. We've got the 11 1.8 for $550, the 15 1.4G for $750, and Laowa has a manual focus 15mm f2 for $850. And then of course we have like the full frame Sony lenses off the charts at 14 1.8 GM for $1,600 and the Sigma 1.8 Art for $1,600. Just a little less wide than this, we have the Sigma 16 1.4 for $450. So it's still more. It's a great lens. It's a little bit old now though, which Sony I think thought left this whole thing wide open for them. But overall, this is the lowest price that you're going to pay for a lens of this wide aperture, this focal length on Sony. So I have to give it a 10 out of 10. Now, they didn't undercut quite as much as they may have in the past, but I think that that's because they've stepped up a little bit with their lens design, very well corrected, a little better sealed, you got the aperture ring, got this great lens hood, crazy fast autofocus, so they went up market just as much as they could while still being able to undercut. So that gives us a total of 50.5 out of 60. Let's see how that compares. Holy! That went a lot higher on my list than I expected it to. None of these categories are really at the top except for value, and autofocus is pretty high up there. It just managed to be consistent enough to really get itself right up there. Even though they didn't see it coming, they didn't know Sony was going to be releasing these lenses, they are still perfectly well positioned to be a budget option if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of weight. If you have any questions about this lens or any comments about our ultra-wide lifestyle going on now, let me know down in the comments below and I'll get back to you. But until next time, let's go take some ultra-wide photos.